All right. Um, this is the report on July 5th, 2025. I have Laith Marouf here. Hey, Laith.
Hey, how you doing, Justin?
So, Laith, it's been a while, but I want to say it's not been a while. It's only been a while since you've been on this channel. It has not been a while since I have listened to you because I listened to you on Dimitri's show, I listened to you on Jamarl's show, and I listened to you on Nima's show. And I think you're probably on other shows too. So for people
Yeah,
who
Garland Nixon
Garland
and
Nixon, yeah. So for people who who are like, hey Justin, you haven't had Laith on, you guys need to know my weekly schedule. And my weekly schedule includes Dialogue Works with Nima, um, what
no
was that?
shade.
What The Reason to
No shade.
Resist with Dimitri and
Yeah, and
Jamal's,
Nima's is dialogue works. Yeah.
yeah, and then Jamal Thomas's show, all of which are great. They have great other guests too, but I never miss Laith and I never miss Morandi, who's also on these shows. Others, Nima talks to a broad diversity of voices, so I just make sure that I catch Laith and Professor Morandi on that one. And then the other thing I want to say before anything else is to show this website, freepalestine.video. It's called Free Palestine TV, but you have to go to freepalestine.video. And that's where Laith, are you, was your formal title the director or the,
Yeah, I'm the executive director at
yeah,
the station, and you know, I do a lot of the field reporting from Lebanon.
yeah.
Um, the English language is, I think, the reason we're not, up until now, we're not diversifying in terms of the who's in front of the camera.
Hmm.
But reports from the West Bank, reports from Lebanon. We're bringing you reports right now from Iran. The team that was just there, which I wasn't with them on the field there. I was in Iraq. They're coming back with a lot of content that should be released in the next few days that is one of a kind. So visit freepalestine.video, follow us on all the socials, and you can donate.
Hmm.
There's the donation button right there. Monthly or regular one-time donation would appreciate it. We're totally 100% viewer funded.
Hmm.
We're not monetized on any platform. And no government or political party funds us. So everything is from our viewers, and we appreciate every donation that comes from them.
Okay. Thank you, Laith. Okay. So my own rant for July 15th before we start is Palestine Action is a terrorist organization. So this non-violent group that was basically doing allegedly doing sabotage operations, and they would go to Elbit Systems in particular, which had a whole bunch of facilities in Britain. Elbit Systems being Israel's military-industrial flagship corporation, and they would, you know, they would damage buildings, machinery, etc. So their whole goal was to get Elbit out of Britain, and they've had various successes. And some of their people are in jail, and they're a lot of the times the people would come before courts, and the juries would acquit them. And so that itself showed a lot of support for this in Britain. There were huge demonstrations against its prescription. And so now it's a proscribed terrorist organization. So the military that's committing genocide is a protected group, and the organization that was trying to um, stop the war machine is a terrorist organization. And then also in Britain, we have Bob Villain, who has popularized the chant "Death to the IDF." And they have been, their talent agency has dropped them. The United Talent Agency has dropped them, and all these concerts are dropping them. And meanwhile, the number of people listening to them and that have heard of them has gone exponentially. I never heard of them until this. I know from hearing you on other channels that you never heard of them before this. But, you know, England is the mothership of the colonial order that we are all experiencing today. And England, um, the legal system of England, as you know, Free Palestine TV's Twitter mentioned, I think yesterday, is the fountain of the law that we all are under in some sense. And so, you know, the International Court of Justice, the International Criminal Court, the United Nations Security Council, the concept of diplomacy, these have all been discarded. And as of yesterday, the legal system of England has basically declared that genocide is the people committing genocide are higher, and the people trying to stop genocide, even expressing support for Palestine Action, is now considered terrorism. So what's going on in England, Laith? What is going on? What do you think?
You see, right now, finally, I think the any pretense of the judiciary system, legal system, the rule of the law that was kept internally within the colonial imperialist domains has been discarded, right? So we saw over those 22 months of in the beginning, the mass media in the West justify genocide and play, you know, guard to any criticism of the genocidal regime and its ideology of Zionism, Jewish supremacy. And then we saw, followed by that, was the stage of Western states, this part of the imperial domain, providing cover and protection for the Zionist colony and this ideology at the international arenas, and combined with the whole military industrial complex of the imperial domains churning to maximum turbo to provide the Zionist colony with all that the weapons that it needs to not only continue genocide in Gaza and conduct genocide in Gaza, but to also genocide anyone that comes to the aid of the Palestinians in Gaza. Okay? And then that was followed by the stage of the total destruction of international law and international humanitarian law that we saw in the ICC and the ICJ. And finally, the last battlefield was internally inside each of those components of the imperial domains, with the disbandment of student groups on campus and banning them that are working against the genocide, mass arrests, and eventually the discarding of even the, you know, the right to presumption of innocence and or the right to defend yourself. These are the basics. You see, those were the first actual indicators that the common law, as we know it, that is practiced in all of the Anglo colonies and formal colonies, is you know, taking its last breaths. Okay. So with the creation of the mechanisms for the Emperor Trump to abduct anyone on the streets of the United States with unmarked vans and masked agents with no identifiers, and to take those people and throw them in internment camps, either inside the United States and or in El Salvador, with no right to defend yourself. Now we get to this point of what is going to become a mass catch. Okay, first it was directed to individuals like some activists here or there or on campuses, journalists in the UK and so forth. Now they are going to, they're so emboldened by the fact that there hasn't been anyone even internal to take a threatening position that could destabilize them as an elite, the Zionist elite, the government, that they're now proscribing anyone who supports Palestine Action, meaning the 250, 60,000, whatever followers on X, as members of a terrorist organization.
Yeah.
Okay? So now we're moved to this stage of mass incarceration that's going to come, right? Not individual persecution. It's going to be mass persecution. And if the populace in the West doesn't revolt right now, okay, the structures are already built in the US with that alligator Alcatraz.
Yeah.
The structures for mass incarceration and extermination camps is already built in the US. I don't know in the UK. Probably it's hidden yet, but it's already probably also built. To deliver on such a position of prescribing Palestine Action as a terrorist organization, you have to have the mass incarceration infrastructure ready. And good luck to the people of the UK if they don't revolt right now.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting, those are interesting connections that I hadn't exactly seen. Like, of course, like you more than a year ago, I remember you, I don't think necessarily on this show, but on one of the things you were on, you were saying there's going to be concentration camps in the West. And here we are, Alligator Alcatraz. I didn't realize El Salvador was going to be one of the destinations with a president that's a Palestinian background, but here we are. But like, yeah, colonies or metropoles historically, the Roman Empire, whatever, they had one rule for themselves and another in the colonies, and they seem to be harmonizing these now with these legal maneuvers. So yeah, I hadn't. It's an interesting connection. Okay, I want to move on to one other thing, because one of the reasons I always listen to you is that unlike a lot of people on our team, you are very resistant to, like, you know, I share this view, which is why I seek you out, but the idea that there's like a big conflict between Witkoff and Netanyahu, or Trump and Netanyahu, and these controversies, and you know, Biden was really mad at Netanyahu and Obama really hated Netanyahu, and these are all for show, ultimately, for us to hope that there's gonna be something that comes out of these controversies. I wanted to know what you think, though, about this. Is a genuine question. I don't know if this is fake or real. I want to know what your thinking is. Is the US really cutting off Ukraine, and are they really cutting off Ukraine because they're running out of war material and they want to make sure Israel has it? Or is this also a thing to try to fake people out?
Well, look, there is a maximum capacity that this empire has in terms of producing death equipment, okay, and maximum capacity to its intelligence capabilities, maximum capacity for its propaganda machine, right? So logically, as we've seen with Iran's response to the attacks by the Zionists, is that the air defense systems of the whole empire were pushed to the edge of depletion.
Yeah.
So there's only a certain amount of THAAD missiles that are available on the planet, and batteries, THAAD batteries. There's only a certain amount of Arrow 123 missiles that Israel can produce, and or Davis Sling. So the capacity issues forced the United States to even withdraw the THAAD defense systems from South Korea. South Korea and Japan were allowed to be exposed to the possibility of a nuclear holocaust by North Korea with
And
no defenses.
And they didn't send their leaders to the NATO summit either. That's a big
Exactly,
deal.
because
Yeah.
they even then, even though that they are house slaves, the Japanese elite and the South Korean elites, they have been given a huge space in the imperial order, and even their culture raised artificially in their cultural output to levels of mass consumption in the West artificially, just to make them feel that they are equal. But in the end of the day, they're still yellow.
Mhm.
Therefore, to the white supremacist elite in the United States and in the West, they come after the Jewish white supremacists that are part of the club and
Mhm.
actually considered are the ones that are, keeping the Muslims and the Arabs at bay and beating them constantly on behalf of the
As
West.
The German foreign minister, I think, said they're doing our dirty work for us.
Exactly. So not only Ukraine, South Korea also suffered of
Mhm.
neglect from Master in the White House. And in fact, I would say Ukraine is in a worse situation because Ukraine was always about one thing. Ukraine was always about forcing Russia to withdraw its troops from Syria. Remember, they started the war in Ukraine 6 months after Russia entered the battlefield in Syria, and they succeeded.
Mhm.
Okay, so they don't really don't give a damn what happens to Ukraine after this point. Okay,
Mhm.
and the other thing is that a Jewish white supremacist was installed as the president of Ukraine to drag and destroy Ukraine on behalf of the Jewish white supremacist colony, right?
Mhm.
This is
Mhm.
the truth. People don't want to cross these lines sometimes,
Yeah.
but this is the truth. This guy, Zelensky, destroyed Ukraine on behalf of his Jewish white supremacist clique that
Well,
he belongs to.
yeah, I remember studying this at the beginning, three 3 years ago or so. There's some Ukrainian Israeli billionaire that has backed Zelensky's career and everything for a long time since he was a comedian. I don't remember his name. You might remember his name. Anyway, I'll try to look it up. But there's someone
Yeah,
in
I don't remember
particular.
his name. I've made it now. I've decided I'm not going to be memorizing Jewish names anymore.
No, but
Uh,
yeah, exactly.
Because
Anyway.
there's too much space in my head here for Jewish
Yeah, yeah, and
history. So
there's
I
this
want to delete
privilege.
this cachet.
Exactly. Yeah, no, I think that's a really important point too. Like it's not when you and I were activists in North America, there was always this, like, I remember being on a panel with a Palestinian at a university. You know who it is, but I'm not gonna. And we gave this talk on, history and BDS and various things, and people in the audience, including Arabs, were like, "How come you didn't have a Jewish person on this panel?" And it was just like this, that understanding of the issue, which, by the way, I've noticed Zohran Mamdani does a lot of that stuff. He's like, I have Jewish people who endorse me. And this is not me. This is saying this. This is Jewish people that are saying this. Jewish organizations. So yeah. Anyway, but
Yeah,
or the munitions issue in
yeah,
Ukraine. But I do want to emphasize before you continue, this point is another really important point, because another reason I always seek you out is, like, I have this and like this Palestine centric kind of geopolitical understanding, which you also have, which is like, Palestine is not a sideshow compared to China or what's going on in South Asia or what's going on in Russia, Ukraine. It's like Palestine is the show. Palestine is the main issue, and a lot of what appears to be peripheral, or a lot of what appears to be going on, like the Russia-Ukraine war, actually has a lot to do um, with what's going on in Palestine and what's happening to Palestine. So the connection that you made between the Ukraine and Russia actually going to war in February of 2022 you know, that was like the timing of the Russian intervention in Syria, all of those things, if you look at those timelines at the same time, like the Maidan thing was 2014, Russia intervened in Syria in 2015, the Russia war is in Russia-Ukraine is 2022, and Russia ends up having to, well, having to, I don't know. We can talk about whether they had to, but
Yeah.
Russia ends up withdrawing from helping the Assad government stay in power
Yeah,
last year.
and you know, there's a huge connection between Ukraine and the colonization of Palestine.
Yes, exactly.
Very
Exactly.
historic, whether it was the ethnic cleansing and genocide of the Muslim Turkic peoples in the northern shores of
Mm,
the Black Sea, in what is now called Ukraine, by the Russian Empire when it invaded that location, and the Russian Empire choosing to populate the ethnically cleansed lands with Jewish European settlers from the edges of the empire,
yeah.
and what became to be called the Jewish Plains, right, in
Hmm.
Ukraine, and at the same time coupling it with the you know, renaming of all the places in the northern shore of the Black Sea to names that are related to Greek and Roman imperial
Hmm.
glory, right, from Odessa to other
Hmm.
places, and how all of this inspired the rise of Zionism as we know it, because as these Jewish elite realized that they, under some imperial tutelage, they can, or protection, they can ethnically cleanse anyone they want to and
Yeah.
settle their land, and also
Yeah.
fabricate a history to
History.
it, and anchor it in this history of superiority of imperial rule. And
Mhm.
that what gave the inspiration to the rise of Zionism in the
Yeah.
late 1800s. And eventually, of course, much of the leaders of the Zionist movement and a huge part of the population of the colonists in Palestine are from Ukraine.
Well, this is yeah, and then yet another connection. We're getting off topic, but yet another connection is like Russia and Ukraine are fighting. You know, maybe 1 million people have died in this war already. Russia's fighting Germany, France, the UK, the US. But like on the issue of Israel and the need to protect Israel from all the people that Israel is genociding, they all agree, all of them, including Russia. Whenever, you know, Russia's support to Syria had like a loophole where they were like, we'll protect you from ISIS, but we won't protect you from Israel because we have a deal with Israel that Israel can bomb you whenever they want. And so Russia is um, extremely unreliable in terms of an ally to Arab um, people.
Yeah, yeah. Look, there's on the one hand, you know, the Soviet Union and the rise of communism in the middle of World War One saved humanity,
Mhm,
saved
mhm,
African, Asian, and Latin American people. Otherwise, we would have been all slaughtered if all the quote unquote whiteys came together in agreement that they are the better race than everybody
mhm,
else. That was what World War One was supposed to do, to give us the top white race. And there was a redo in World War Two, a fight between the Anglo-Germanic people to see who's on top.
mhm,
But having said that, the Soviet Union made the, you know, by centering its battle as a battle against capitalism, and
mhm,
the and making directing its speech to the quote unquote white world, and
mhm,
having this, I get, put it back into this context of a fight between whiteys on who is better, whether
mhm,
it's their ideology or their race. Okay.
mhm.
And their fight against the third world movement and fighting against China and Abdel Nasser and
Yeah.
others meant that they had their priority was again to be the ones that choose, which is, and now what we see today with Russia, especially with the dangerous return into this idea of Russia is the protector of Christendom.
Yeah.
Russia is the protector of the family values.
Hmm.
And this is all again directed towards the West
Hmm.
population. And it's a championing, it's a battle between the Russian elite and the Western elite to say who represents this whiteness
Hmm.
more truly. And this is
Yeah.
where the limitation falls for
Hmm.
Russia and Syria. In the end, us Arabs, Muslims, people that come from Africa, Asia, and Latin America, we're just going to get crushed under the jostling feats between that if we cannot have our own pole of power that doesn't need any backing from these.
Yeah.
And that was the attempt of Jamal Abdel Nasser, that was the attempt of Tito, that was the attempt of Sukarno, and of course, this is the attempt of Iran today.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean the Russian, I mean, people made a lot out of Putin saying we wanted a comprehensive strategic partnership with Iran, but they didn't want one. He was polite, but it's like, what, were you going to offer them the same deal you gave Syria? Like, we'll support you, but not against Israel? And if not, like, why? Why would you offer that deal to Syria, but a different deal to Iran? Like, obviously that would have been the deal. Like, there's 2 million of the Israelis, I think, are Russian citizens too. And
Yeah, and
Russia
and
is
and
obsessed with
Russia,
protecting its citizens all over the world, including Israel.
yeah, and Russia sold the S-400s to Turkey.
Yeah, yeah,
And Iran paid for the S-400s, and they were not delivered.
yeah,
Russia even was almost going to give Turkey Sukhoi fighters,
yeah.
but it wouldn't give them to Iran, although again, they signed the contracts.
Hmm.
So what's the point here? So it's clear that I want also, just so people don't only think of this as a racial, which doesn't exist, race,
Yeah,
or
exactly.
civilizational war and so on. The truth is there's geography, rules,
Yeah,
history, and the course of it. And our curse in the region, Arabic peoples and Muslim peoples in the periphery of that, is that we are in the center of geography,
yeah,
where
yeah,
the Africa, Asia, and Europe meet. Therefore, we are the most dangerous if we are unified to the hegemony of the peripheral cultures. Therefore, if I'm a Russian nationalist, I would be worried Arabs are going to unify.
mm,
If I am a European supremacist, I will be worried if Arabs are unified. If I am like a Chinese or Indian, and or if there was a South Africa that was actually sovereign fully, they would be worried about the center being unified. It's because geography rules, and then the center rules. So the only way for Arabs and Muslims, uh, not because they're Arabs or Muslims, those who live in those geographic
mhm.
locations to actually have sovereignty is to do it by themselves, unfortunately.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I completely uh, agree. I mean, I will, my instincts, I want to defend China a little bit in the sense that they do, at least say that they want everybody to be unified and prosperous, and for the most part, I don't see them, their thing is they just don't get involved. So they're just like, oh well, we'll trade with everybody. We'll trade with Israel while they're genociding. We'll trade with we'll trade with all sides. We'll have good relations with everybody. So I don't know. I also think that has its limitations in a situation like this one. So
Yeah, I mean, China's
yeah.
history weighs on them in terms of we look at their historical records of interaction with the rest of humanity, and it's clear that they've avoided anything but trade, not only
Hmm.
from communist times, but all the way
Hmm.
to tens of thousands of years. So that's something. And I would say also that China, uh, unlike the Soviet Union, refused to recognize the Zionist colony until
Hmm.
the house slave Mahmoud Abbas,
Yeah.
accepted the existence of a Zionist colony. But they do have a huge responsibility right now, being the largest economy in the world, to go further. Even if they don't want to give weapons to the resistance and or Iran, they all they need to do is stop their trade, and the ramifications would be probably more than a military involvement of Russia into
Hmm.
that fight,
Yeah.
honest to God. So we do have to talk to our Chinese brothers and sisters, and given the fact that the vast majority of Chinese people support the liberation of
Yeah.
Palestine, I think they have a chance to move their leadership into that direction if
Yeah.
they work on it.
Um, I think they might be selling weapons to Iran, though. I mean, that's what I've seen. I've seen some reports of some shopping trips. Anyway, um, the main reason, we haven't gotten to the main reason I wanted to talk to you, which is, so again, let me set it up chronologically a little bit because Israel started this war with Iran, but before they started this war with Iran, they started this genocide in Gaza in 2023, and were they fairly quickly, I think, some sort of reason prevailed, and they said, "Oh, let's have a ceasefire." So there was this moment. They did an exchange of prisoners, and then I think they sort of lost that ability to have a ceasefire, and then they went back and continued the genocide. And then they did it, I think, one more time, uh, January, or yeah, January to March. I mean, time is a bit of a blur,
Yeah,
but
like the election of Trump, his inauguration.
yeah, okay. And in between, a couple of huge things happened. They attacked Lebanon, and they tried to just they said, we're going to destroy Hezbollah. They assassinated Hassan Nasrallah. They um, they did this pager attack, and they attacked Lebanon. But even with those things, they couldn't um, defeat Hezbollah on the ground, although they caused a lot of chaos in Lebanon, as you personally know and have reported. Um, they then, but the big thing that they did when they had that ceasefire at around early 2024, their big success, I'd say so far, was Syria. They finally engineered the downfall of Syria, and that was, you've talked about it a lot. I've written about it too. That had a lot to do with the conditional Russian support for Syria. And it had a lot to do with the Turkish, Turkey was always kind of equivocating about whether to do this big push. And then they like fairly decisively joined the Zionist side rather than just supplying them behind the scenes and so on. So if Russia leaves and Turkey joins, that's going to be a huge strategic difference in the situation. So now we're hearing that Israel and is talking about a ceasefire again uh, with in Gaza. And I again think that probably has something to do with their army. There are probably officers in their army that are saying, you know, we can't really win this. And so there's always that realization that comes after a long period of war that Israel is not going to win. And then they try to seek a ceasefire to see if the situation can change for a bit. Now, when this happens, Israel always cooks up a certain kind of operation, and it's like a surprise. And so the Syria thing was a surprise. It was this HTS coming out of nowhere, you know, all various military things that they apparently had going for them. The pager attack in Lebanon. So a different country, a series of terrorist attacks, atrocities, assassinations, similar to Iran. They did the same thing in Iran, and then the country that's attacked has to kind of catch up, reorganize, and then try to defend themselves. So for me, the one predictable thing is that they're going to do this again. And to me, it looks like signs are that this is going to happen in Lebanon. And the signs include, like, even as late as yesterday, um, some of the leaders of Syrian HTS saying we are mulling the idea of giving Israel the Golan Heights. Like, you've given Israel the Golan Heights. What are you talking about? But giving Israel the Golan Heights in exchange for Lebanese territories, which Israel doesn't control. So they're already talking about this. So these are to me signs that of a kind of a plan where HTS Jolani's people invade Lebanon from the north while their Israelis attack presumably from the south, and they try to partition, occupy Lebanon. I mean, yeah, and so that's kind of like the next surprise attack pattern that I think is coming, and that's mainly what I wanted to see what you thought about that. So maybe talk about the ceasefire first, and then that.
Yeah, I mean, this morning the Israelis fired on two cars and a home, all in the south of Lebanon. I don't know the news about the martyrs and injured. One of those attacks was on a home in the Shaba Farms area, Shaba. And yesterday, the Israeli military invaded more parts of Syria. In fact, they went the furthest point, 10 kilometers outside Damascus, almost on the highway between Damascus and Beirut before the borders, checkpoint between the two countries. And they have occupied a few villages that overlook Shaba Farms and Yafur in a little bit in the Qalamon Mountains, closer to Damascus on the Lebanese side. So they're taking positions right now overlooking Lebanese villages in the south that they haven't any lookout at before. And the Shaba Farms, this is the corner between the Golan Heights, Syria's Golan Heights, South Lebanon, and Palestine. There's treaties from the 1950s between Syria and Lebanon drawing that border, making those Shaba Farms as Lebanese territories. These are the outskirts of Shaba village. And the new Jolani regime wants to claim that this is part of Lebanon, and or if Israel takes it as part of Israel. So this way to take away any justification that the resistance has in South Lebanon to attack that part to try to liberate it. Remember, before the Al-Aqsa flood, weeks before the Al-Aqsa flood, October 2023. So we're talking about in September 2023, Hezbollah had entered the occupied parts of the Shaba Farms and set up tents there in the open and dared the Zionists to attack. There was farmers that were fighting back tanks with their own hands. This is weeks before October 7th, okay? So all that we're talking about right now here in terms of what the Israelis plan, what their Wahhabi house slaves want, and the statement coming out from the Wahhabi government in Damascus saying that they are willing and want to occupy Tripoli, Trablus, which is the second largest city in Lebanon, It's on the north shore, just 10 minutes drive from the border with Syria, and the Beqa Valley, which is the food basket, and it's open to the Homs Valley and the Beqa Valley are connected. It's easy to, if you remember, at the beginning of the takeover by HTS of Syria, there was attempts to actually invade Lebanese villages in the north, and the local tribes and clans in North Lebanon fought a whole battle and destroyed, huge formations of HTS that were trying to come, and the Israelis provided them with air cover to try to open a corridor for HTS to invade. It didn't work then. It's not going to work now. And we woke up over the last 2 days with the Lebanese government, saying that it was approached by the United States, saying that they want them to disarm Hezbollah completely everywhere. Otherwise, there'll be continued a blockade on Lebanon and all of those things. And now we're hearing, voices from the servants of the Zionists here in Lebanon calling for the disarmament. There was a huge response from Hezbollah statements and the populace in Lebanon saying, forget it. There's no way, after watching this genocide of Shia, Alawis, Christians, and Druze, which is continuing and ongoing, and the ethnic cleansing of them in Syria every day, we're watching these videos, it's a hallucination to think that Hezbollah would disarm under these conditions. And Hezbollah is preparing, I think, for this coming war. This is why mostly it's been silent on any other issues, because there's rapid sorry about that, rearmament, and all these assassinations that we're seeing of Hezbollah members. It's clear that Hezbollah's leadership have acknowledged that 15 years of peace between 2006 and 2023, led to the Israelis being able to map out every member possible in the leadership of Hezbollah, their families, their extended families, their movements, their houses, their safe houses. And therefore, everybody that we see right now being assassinated is somebody that has been removed from their positions and told that it doesn't matter if they change their number or not. Anyways, AI has mapped every relative of yours, and the minute your wife goes visits her sister, they'll know where you are. So we're seeing right now a kind of purposeful abandonment of anyone that's been exposed already, with those people acknowledging that it's going to be martyrdom, right? And in new structures and leaderships of Hezbollah that have been put into power, and new plans that are designed for the upcoming war, which is not a war of support for Gaza, but a war of survival against an invasion from the Wahhabis and the Zionists. And I think Hezbollah is going to surprise everybody if that happens.
Yeah, I mean the other thing that I want people to kind of remember is these spectacular successes by the Islamic State in Iraq, I don't know, half a generation ago or whatever, in Syria, and in Syria just now. The main reason they were so successful was because the US sponsored army in Iraq at that point just kind of melted away. That was the initial run of ISIS about 10 plus years ago, right? And in Syria too, for a whole bunch of reasons that have to do, I think, mainly with 13, 14 years of devastating sanctions and selective bombing and all of these things. The government collapsed, the army collapsed. So there was always like when I was following this as it was happening, I was like, okay, today Hamas fallen, tomorrow they're going to fight over Homs, and they were kind of announcing that. They were like, we've withdrawn our forces to consolidate our defenses, and they just withdrew until they basically melted away altogether. And so Hezbollah is not going to melt away, but but the Lebanese army very much, like, the plan might include the Lebanese army melting away, because that initial melt also has a huge psychological value in these in these military affairs, and uh, and ISIS in particular depends on that shock value of the military that's in front of them melting as they attack. So what do you assess as the likelihood of that happening?
Well, lucky for us, there's no Lebanese army, and everybody's used to it melting away for decades.
Okay.
So
Okay.
yeah, that's not going to be any shock. And I
Right.
mean, I visited all those northern
Yeah.
villages that are right on the border with Syria, and I've seen the preparations and spoken to the locals, not on camera, about what their expectations are and what they're ready for or not. In fact, they're more worried about the army turning on them instead of melting.
Yeah.
This is
Yeah.
more their worries. But the Lebanese army cannot do anything worse than ISIS could, or it definitely is not even in the same category as fighter as ISIS. ISIS fighters are drugged up fanatics that are looking to mass rape and pillage. This is their drive. This is a real
Yeah.
drive. It's not a Lebanese soldier that's waiting for his shitty salary, right? And I would caution us talking about the Syrian military really melting. Over the last 6 months,
Mm.
I met a lot of people that were part of the Republican Guard of Syria
Mhm.
and of Hezbollah fighters inside Syria. And I sat down, and I have a lot of documents that we should be probably publishing soon from archive records of Syrian military leadership inside as this battle was rolling out. And I could tell you and assure you 100% that Hezbollah fighters faced off with ISIS in Homs,
Mm.
HTS, and defeated them. And they pushed to Hama and defeated their battalions there. And as they were entering Hama, unidentified aircrafts, and that is basically what is believed to be Russian aircrafts, bombarded the columns of Hezbollah.
Oh.
This was there was also the 8th army of the Republican Guard that was pushing from Idlib towards Aleppo, and actually from Saraqib up to Idlib city, and they were out on the outskirts of Idlib city, okay, when they were also bombarded but by Russian aircrafts. So when
Right, and
the
there were reports of Russian air support of the Syrian army, so those details, yeah, you could easily, what's the word? It could easily
hide
look
the
like
fact
that.
that you're attacking the Syrian army.
Yeah,
See, when
exactly.
the HTS rushed into Aleppo, they left Idlib basically with no
Undefended.
huge fortifications.
Yeah.
And that opened up for the Republican Guard that is protecting the coast of Syria to attack into Idlib, and Idlib almost fell, the city. So the majority of the military on the ground, whether it's Syrian military and or the Hezbollah that was on the ground, fought until it was very clear that the Russian Air Force will destroy them if they continue their successes in pushing back HTS. And this is above and beyond the coming artillery that was coming, long-range artillery from Turkey hitting all the way to
Yeah.
Hama. Okay, so
Right.
it was, and that brings us back to this, the stupid decisions of Russia that it made, whether it's propped up Erdogan and his dance with the Zionists, versus the only people that supported Russia in the region, which was the Axis of Resistance. And we will one day read those documents within the Russian archive.
So that's fascinating. And it does remind me, I guess, as I stress out about this possibility, that Hezbollah has been fighting HTS for a long time now, for 10 plus years. So it's not they have a lot of experience with how they do things. And I'm sure I'm sure I mean, it's just Hezbollah's been so, I mean, you know, they were just the pager attack. I think people don't appreciate how devastating that was. And the ability to rebuild in such a manipulative context where the Americans also stepped up their involvement with the Lebanese government and building their gigantic embassy and constantly getting in there. Did you see the report in the Cradle? I don't know if you saw this, but it was a weird one. I wonder what your comment is. The source is Reuters, so totally unreliable, but this was yesterday. Did you see this? Hezbollah mulls partial disarmament, but it's an anonymous source. It says one senior official, three sources familiar. So this is just like this is almost like that classic report by some guy who says he's Hezbollah at a bar or whatever. Is that
Yeah, I
is
mean,
that the
wouldn't it be nice if me and you can just quote anonymous sources, tell us that Netanyahu sold his son or something like that, or what is this? Like, this is how ridiculous it is. Anytime there is no anonymous sources in Hezbollah that would speak
right?
to anybody, especially Reuters or Associated Press, and I personally will never share such a report.
Hmm.
You know, different
Yeah,
media outlets choose what they want to do, but there's no point of sharing such a report. It just
it's a
gives credence
questionable,
to, yeah.
yeah, questionable sourcing for sure.
But there's a
Um,
lot of people that want clickbait, so what can I say?
yeah. So I mean, I think you also think this is likely, this type of attack. This is likely to be the next thing we see that they're gonna. I mean, there's this, yeah, like Syria and Israel both have invaded Lebanon before. I mean, Syria was supporting Lebanon against Israel, but it was there's a pattern of this kind of these armies moving into Lebanon from these two geographical areas. And so I
Yeah,
just
and isn't it funny that Netanyahu comes out and says, we finally have defeated our major enemy, Arabic nationalism, which is basically
Mhm,
Arabic unification movements since the 1940s, with the fall of Damascus. So the last Arabic republic that was pushing
mhm,
for that is gone. And now our biggest threat is Iranian nationalism.
mhm. Yeah, just
Uh, isn't it
anybody.
isn't it isn't it crazy? Like, Syria has been fighting for, since 1942, since the French and the English artificially chopped up Lebanon from
Yeah,
Syria. Syria has been fighting to unify with Lebanon since then. And the West has fought it to the last minute about that. And now the West is willing to give Lebanon to
to
Syria only
Syria.
if it kisses the hand and the
Yeah,
finger and the toes and sucks them of the Zionists. This is basically what you have to do.
they're gonna reunify Greater Syria. It's just gonna be under Jolani or whatever. Well, yeah, but they want to give all the high points to Israel, right? So,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, look, the West was willing to also have a greater Syria with ISIS.
Yeah.
They were willing to allow ISIS to unify Iraq and Syria.
Including Iraq, yeah.
Yes. The only reason they fought them is because Iran was winning against them and Syria was winning against them. Therefore, they needed some other prop up. And that's when the Kurds were brought into the picture as if they are victims and they're colonizers. And this is where we had, but they were willing, literally, again, to have a unified Syria as long as it's a Wahhabi Zionist imperialist tool.
Yeah, I mean, just one point that you just you just kind of said it as an aside, but like this is something, the Kurdish organizations in Syria are from Turkey. So there's like a very, very small number of Syrian Kurds. But like the actual, like, the Kurds that you hear about that are in Syria are for the most part from Turkey too. So it's like Turkey's been invading Syria for the past 10 some years to fight Kurds who are also from Turkey.
Yeah, and you have to believe the theatrics, obviously, all of this.
Yeah.
Um, otherwise none of it makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Kurds and Turks, both in the pocket of the United States, both allied with Israel, right, are supposedly fighting each other.
Yeah, and
And also they're
all of their fights end with more Syrian territory being taken over by either Turkey or the US.
and more
Or
depopulation of Arabs, more genocides of Arabs, right?
yeah.
And more American bases and more resources looted. Okay. And all of them are supposedly fighting ISIS, so
Hmm.
this is all, and, look, there was always Kurds in Syria, but a very, very small minority. Prior to World War I, most of us lived in areas that are similar to whatever we grew up in. There was no borders, no
Hmm.
passports, no visas, and still people stayed in ecological zones that are familiar to them, right?
Hmm.
So Kurds are mountain people, and they
Hmm.
come from the Taurus Mountains and the Zagros Mountains, the sections of them that we call Kurdish, mountains, and their invasion of northern Syria, what is now, and northern Iraq, which is now in what we call Turkey, was part of a ethnic cleansing campaign of the Armenians, of the Arabs, of the Assyrians at the hands of the Ottoman Empire to create these, so unfortunately for the Kurdish people, they have always been, their leadership have always used, allied with empires in their ethnic cleansing campaigns and
Hmm.
repopulation campaigns since World War I.
Yeah. Whew. Well, we've covered a lot of ground. Um, you know, the so I mean, I guess what do you think we should watch for? I think we should watch for the next big attack on Lebanon. I don't think the Israelis are gonna attack Iran right away. Uh, I think there's a lot of like they're irrational, but they're not irrational in that sense. They do things that are self-destructive in the long term, but I just don't think I think they can look at their buildings and their bases and conclude that they don't want to do this again very soon. Um,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if we look at the results of Iran's response, the United States, and the whole Zionist empire, pushed this to the highest limit of
mhm,
warfare below the nuclear threshold, and they failed in their military objectives, and their defense mechanisms of the whole empire failed to protect the Zionist colony from Iran's missile and drone attacks. The damage to the Zionist colony is unprecedented, and the amount of colonists that ran away already is also unprecedented, to the point where they had to kind of cage them in to use them as human shields. Otherwise, the colony would have been emptied if they opened the doors. And so there's no going back from that, and there's no way to actually replay this war with Iran if you're not willing to use a nuclear weapon. And therefore, the Israelis, the Zionists, globally and inside the colony, their elite, are left with no choice but to try to make an example of some smaller, enemy. So their own fascists in the streets of Washington, D.C. can come out of their depression and can feel again like that they are the chosen people and that they can kill at will anyone that comes, that FAFO mentality that they keep on. I hate this, right? I hate it whenever somebody uses this word, even from our side. I'm like, what the fuck is this?
Yeah, exactly.
You know? Netanyahu will have to attack somebody. Either it's the West Bank or Lebanon or Yemen. And there's no other choice for him. Yemen,
Yemen's not gonna.
He doesn't want to repeat that one.
Yeah. But okay, I guess let's conclude then with the ceasefire. What do you make of this talk of a ceasefire with Hamas now? Any thoughts about that?
It's another waste of time. There will be no ceasefire that is meaningful, and if there is one that is going to be temporary, there will be a return to the slaughter. Look, Bob Villain saying those words on stage, death to the IDF, I think is a great barometer of human consciousness. Okay. And so if this war is stopped completely, with or without the defeat of the Zionist colony, the time of reckoning will come immediately after. So anyone and everybody that had the energy to fight against the genocide over the last 22 months will be directing it to bring those who were responsible to justice. Therefore, Israel is done, whether they stop it or not. And this is why they are getting more and more violent, more and more openly genocidal, and why the desperation in the elite in the West of going all as far as prescribing Palestine Action as a terrorist organization and whatever is going to follow. So I think this war will never end until the end of the Zionist colony. We're going to continue on this for another year, probably. There will be hundreds of thousands of martyrs across the region. But the end is coming of the Zionist colony. There's no going back from this. And the Zionists will not stop the war before they're defeated.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think I'd love to see a ceasefire, but it does seem like Israel is set up now to be at war while it exists and won't stop until it doesn't exist anymore. That's how it looks to me too. All right, Laith. On that happy note, thank you so much for joining me. I'll see you on all the other shows and freepalestine.video, and let's talk again soon.
Thank you, Justin. See you soon, Habibi.